Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
So many business challenges come down to one thing: people problems. How do you turn those into opportunities for growth, connection, and success? That's what Chris is here to talk about today. With decades of experience in film, events, and entrepreneurship, he's mastered the art of blending strategy, storytelling, and people first design to create lasting impact. So let's dive into here how Chris transforms problems into powerful experiences. Chris Sturges from Firing Up Events, and he is the founder of that company and vice president of ILEA Canada, with more than 30 years of experience in film, large-scale events, and entrepreneurship. Chris is known for designing unforgettable, people-focused experiences that blend storytelling, strategy, and innovation together. He's also helped shape communities like Hive 604 Software, Valley Tech, and multiple business networks. Chris, welcome back to the Knack for Business podcast. Good to have you here, sir. You have a favorite quote or say? You have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
Favorite quote or saying? Well, the one you asked this earlier, I went to the one that resonated most. Believe. Roy Batty, I've seen things you wouldn't believe. And it's a quote around his experiences and his life that is ending and all of the things that would be lost. And the reason that resonates is because that's what we all have. We all have a set of experiences, and if we don't share them, they will be lost.
Absolutely. That was played by Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer, yeah.
Yeah, almost said his name right. Almost.
I was
Do you have a tagline for your business?
I do. It sums everything up, I think. We bring spectacular to your event. And by that, I mean we bring the memorable and the stunning and the awe-inspiring to a very simple event. To whatever you've designed, we add touches to it that make it so much more than you could possibly have imagined. Because if people aren't talking about it, it didn't happen.
No, that's actually quite true. I totally want. The people problem. What's the first?
Are people problems?
I know some would just be, that's unfortunate. It blew up. The people being involved, like asteroids hitting something.
If something blows up, it's a people problem because A, something happened that it blew up, and B, how are the people? I had something blow up on set. It was unfortunate. And I looked at it and said, okay, this is repairable. We can keep going. And by that point in time, they were already canceling the shoot and shutting down the set because it wasn't about the explosion. Nobody was hurt. Everybody was fine, but it was the shock. It disrupted the flow of work and the trauma. People just weren't ready to go back to work and finish shooting. So we rescheduled it for a couple of weeks later and it went off without a hitch. But it's always a people problem.
So what's the first thing you look for when you're designing an event that, bearing in mind people can't pose a problem?
It's funny that when you're designing an event, where do you start? Right? You start with the people, the audience. Why are you making the event? You're making the event so that the event appeals to an audience. It has cultural significance, or maybe you're just trying to make money, but ultimately it has to cater to your audience. And if you don't start with the audience, and it's the same in film, in tech startups, or in special events, you got to start with the audience. So you have to understand your people and start designing around how you're going to engage the people. And honestly, if you're going to make it spectacular, you start at the beginning. Right? You make those, put right into the design. How are you going to stun this crowd? My idea of my event company was ultimately supposed to be a franchise. And so one of the ideas that I was thinking about was, how do you stun a crowd of franchisees that are used to running spectacular at all their events? I came up with some ideas. It would be stunning. The insurance would be staggering. But anyway, we'll get there later.
So it's a bit of shock and awe, but shock and awe they haven't seen before, right?
Yeah, it always has to be shock and awe. And if you're, for example, if you're trying to shock and awe a group of military veterans, you're going to do that differently. You're not going to use explosions and pyrotechnics and things like that to shock and awe that crowd, right? You don't know who's got issues, but also it's not something that they're going to appreciate. Shock and awe would be driving up a truckload of kittens and puppies, and just like a dump truck, right? And dumping all of this cuteness on them. That would be shock and awe for that crowd. So if you don't know your crowd, you're going to have a hard time achieving the objective.
So that's a good point. Why do so many people start things without learning the crowd?
I wish I knew. Honestly, so it's going to come up, and it's actually part of what I'm doing as the vice chair of operations, which is my technical title with ILEA. We're trying to actually engage all the people that are just starting and catch them before they make some of those mistakes. It's going to become extra critical because at the meeting that I was in last night, we were talking about a very large sports event that is going to be going on here in Canada in really very, 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 very short order. And there is no planning in place yet. And to circumvent some of the chaos that is about to happen, we're building out and rolling out our entire cadre of professionals that know how to do this. And we're going to place them through every venue and every opportunity to make sure this comes off, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of people who've never done this before trying to run an event for 150 or 200,000 people at a time. So let's make sure we get the people part right.
That would help.
It's all.
So, can you share a moment where putting people first actually changed the outcome of the event? In other words, it could be a festival, whatever.
Every
But
festival, every event, it always changes the outcome of the event. What's a good example of that? Well, I mean, so the rum cruise that I was going to run earlier this year, or it was next year, but we looked at it and it was going to be a great cruise, cruising through the Caribbean, hitting all the best rum spots in the Caribbean on a sailing ship. Was going to be a stunning event. And then the politics of the world changed, and we realized that the people experience was going to be under exceptional pressure. And we couldn't guarantee the safety of the people. The same thing we did a similar event with the Vancouver Science Fiction Convention, VCon. We had an issue where we were going to run an event during COVID. It was all safe. We had all the safety things. But the one thing that we couldn't guarantee the safety of was we couldn't guarantee the safety of the participants, considering there had already been anti-mask protests and a lot of physical protesting going on, and we couldn't guarantee the safety of our people. So we rescheduled it. I ran an event with a local Burning Man community, and they said, we want to run an effigy burn. There's a campfire ban and there's a total fire ban right now. I was fire safety officer, so we checked and okay, well, the local fire department is cool with it. The native band whose land it is on is totally cool with it. Everybody is completely cool with it. What about the public? What are they going to do if in the middle of a fire ban they see this massive fire going on for a private party? So I pulled the plug on it and I said, this is poor optics. This is going to bite us in the ass and could destroy us as a community. We're not going to do this. The following Monday morning, I get a phone call at 9 a.m. saying, hi, it's so-and-so from the province newspaper. I heard you did an effigy burn on the weekend during the fire ban. And it's like, yeah, no, we did. Thank you for calling. But yes, we chose not to for specifically this reason. And they went, oh, so no story. I said, no story. I said, damn it. Okay.
you should have said there is a story. It's just it's not on fire. Sorry, bad pun.
See, those are three. I believe that every event always has a piece and element when when people choices change the event, and they all should. It's essential.
So if you're on a limited budget as a business, how do you have something that pops? It's people centric and has pizzazz. Because at the end of the day, the pizzazz is what's going to draw your audience in. And being mindful of who the audience is, what would attract a 50-year-old male is not the same that would attract a 5-year-old male.
Absolutely.
Typically,
So,
unless of course they all both have a sweet tooth.
Yeah. So limited budgets. So if you're starting with people first, it's really funny how fast you find out you don't need budget. If you understand your audience, you know exactly who it's being made for, and you already have a multitude of contacts in that community or that you actually start crowdsourcing. When you start asking people for help, those people that want to help are almost certainly going to become part of your event. They're going to promote it, but they're also going to provide assets that you never expected. Oh, I can't even think of how many. So I ran something called a global warming party. These were particularly fun. They were fun on a level that I could not describe in public. On average, we would lose 300 days of work after a party that happened on a Saturday. So because people could not face going back to work in an office, sometimes on Tuesday. The last event we ran, people started showing up with their own theme camps, something that we get from Burning Man and the Burning Man community. People started showing up with art installations and special activations of their own volition with no prompting from the outside world, no suggestions at all. They started just bringing stuff so that they could become more of the event. They could support the event being even more magical than it already was. I say, the more you do that, the more depth you're going to get out of it. We've run events where so one of the things that I always do is I always try to have at least 3 activations or 3 things going on so that your event has legs to stand on, just like a stool, right? People, if you've got alcohol, if it's a bar event, well, maybe people don't want to drink. Maybe they're not into it. Maybe it's a dancing and live music and the music doesn't roll with them, so they don't feel like dancing. What are different alternatives? One of the ones that we just put up a sheet and put a light behind it and did shadow plays. The audience loved it. I mean, it got pretty graphic. There were broomsticks. It was amazing, but the audience loved it. The audience participated. All we did was a light and the sheet, nothing else. Everybody else contributed. If you give your audience a chance to participate before, during, or after, they love it. They want in.
So here's a question for you, Chris.
Yeah.
You are setting fire things and showing up big bright lights. You also are trying to run a business that probably has some very pedantic, pedestrian things like HR. Tell me about running a boring business when you're actually blowing things up.
Well, unfortunately, in most cases, the blowing stuff up stuff doesn't happen as much as everything else does. We don't get to do as much as that as we'd like. And that's for the better. There's a lot of reasons not to. I'm spending a lot more time these days focusing on safety of all things. But yeah, no, there's always a business. But again, it comes back to the same thing. People. How you run your business is the people that you bring in and the people that you engage. You don't have to, as a sole business owner, you don't have to do it yourself. You shouldn't do it yourself. It's engage your friends, engage your network, let people help you, because in most cases people want to help. And then it's a way of figuring out how to let them help and how to keep an equation so that you're not just accepting all this help and they're not getting anything out of it. Now, I have been called on that. And that I just wasn't giving people enough opportunity to help. I do a lot of volunteer run events, and I found that I had to create events that created room for volunteers so that people could help. But you can also do that in ways where you have a collaboration. And that's one of the best events. The Christmas show that I did last fall, we'd been talking about it for months, and then it came time to actually pull the trigger and start sourcing the resources. And I called up my friend who did lighting decorations. Silent Lights is his company in Vancouver. And he said, yeah, I got that. I said, oh, well, I'm going to need a lot of lights. He says, I have 2 or 3 million linear feet of Christmas lights. I've got your lights. And then he said, oh, do you want lasers? He says, yeah, I got those on the shelf. How about this? Yeah, panda, 20-foot long panda or polar bear. Got that. 30-foot Christmas tree. Yeah, I got that. And he had all of this stuff. And that part of it made the whole logistics very, very, very easy. Then I needed a chair for Santa to sit on, and I needed a Santa. Called a friend. I tried to shop around for a Santa. Couldn't find somebody that I was comfortable with. Called a friend. He did it, and he had a fantastic time. I built a lasting relationship out of the guy who provided the chair and the igloo for Santa to sit in. And we've still got an ongoing relationship to this day. Let your friends help, especially if you happen to be talking about tech startups. Let your friends help.
You said something earlier about when there's an audience participation that's basically organic or organic, spontaneous. How do they know? How do you set it up so they know that, yeah, that's, it's almost like having that etiquette redefined. Yeah, you can do that versus no, we're not having a burn party this week because of, fire ban, et cetera. But how do you let them know that they can participate and be organic? In other words, they can show up and just be themselves and just be there versus if you're going, let's say, to Mardi Gras or one of the festivals in Rio de Janeiro, where all of a sudden you get all these plumes out of nowhere, right? How do you set it up so they know they can do that?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I talk to event planners about very often is most event planners have a list. What do you call it when the members on your list start talking to each other? That's called a community, right? That community, as you run events and as you build out an organic community, that community starts to understand the rules and they start to communicate the rules amongst themselves. As I mentioned about the global warming party, there were very specific rules around there because that party was the majority of that party was clothing optional. And they had the rules there where just because you can see it doesn't mean you can touch it. Right. Very, very, very simple. But like, how do you know people are it's people get the cues to participate? You set up your events around that. Also, you have people that know the rules that are there. You have what I call stiffeners, or what do you call it? Not rookie. When you have somebody that's a plant in a party, I
A
work with
shill.
a shill. Yeah, you absolutely need those people if you want to have to get a party that isn't an audience and community you already know. You have those people involved so they can make suggestions, run directions, be a party person. A lot of organizations involve third-party services where they bring attractive young ladies in to get the drinks flowing and various things like that. That's a paid service. I've never had to pay for that because my community provides all those type of people, men and women, that want to be out there and driving the party. And that's you attract those people by making that clear in the language and the way that you build that community and the way that you put it out there. I have a particularly effusive way of marketing. Everybody knows, and my hands are moving, but everybody knows that I'm excited, excitable, and I want excitement. They know that there's going to be no pushback if somebody gets overexcited. If somebody breaks the rules, then there's going to be rapid and immediate pushback, and you'll be ejected you know, or else other things will happen. That was one of the rules of the global warming party is if you broke the rules, you were ejected on the spot and never allowed to return. Period. Ever. There are still 4 people that have been ejected from that party that will never be allowed to attend another event because they broke the rules strongly. But if you create an environment of safety as well, if you create an environment of protection and safety where you actually follow up on that stuff immediately, people feel more comfortable going outside of their own bubble, outside of their own comfort zone. So that by establishing that, you can encourage people. It's a little bit like encouraging leadership through listening, which doesn't sound right, but it works.
Chris, we have survived a pandemic and the world shut down, and you were in the event planning business and your world shut down harder than most. What made you decide to bounce back when you could have stayed a victim and nursed Ed rum till forever?
Great question. And I appreciate that because not only was I in the event business, but I also was working full-time in film. And so I had 2 industries that in my mind, this was a lock. I am not going to miss a day of work in the rest of my life. I am set forever. And then on the Wednesday, because we actually shut down our operation before the rest of the world shut down, because we could see what was coming. I'm sitting there at home on Wednesday afternoon after being sent home and going, what the hell? My entire life, everything in my life is now gone. And I did dwell in that. I lived in that pit of despair for almost 24 hours. And then I realized, okay, this is not changing. This is going to be long term and I'm going to survive. So how am I going to do this? I need to pivot. I need people. Recognize that as a fundamental need. And so I pivoted to hybrid events. I pivoted to online. That was like the day after that, I started actually building and exploring hybrid events. Obviously, they weren't hybrid right in the beginning, but we started looking at all the safety protocols. And I started reinventing my world right then and there, primarily because I realized that the only failure in the world is giving up. This is why I run something called Fuck Up Nights. It's a global franchise, not mine, but I happen to strongly believe in celebrating our failures because if we don't embrace and own our failures, then how are we going to get better? How are we going to make bigger, better mistakes, right? But how do we learn from what we're doing? And also, if you don't learn, if you're too scared to make mistakes, that means you're not taking risks, which means you're never going to explore the pieces that you need.
So storytelling is a big part of this process. We've heard from other people, whether you're writing a book, you're doing a PowerPoint, giving a speech. In this case, it's like always combined into a theatrical moment. So how do you package storytelling as part of the event strategy? Is that like, are you building the crescendo up? It's almost like, when you watch your favorite pick a show and they're doing the season finale and they just leave you a cliffhanger and to bring you back for the next season. Is that how you structure it? Is what type of formats do you deploy to help build out the storytelling?
The short and simple answer is yes. You have to use all of them. I was at an event and I was talking about the things that I did. And The couple that I was talking to, the lady said, "Oh, you're the storyteller." And it's like, "Yep, called me out right then and there." But you have to tell the stories because stories evoke emotion, and emotion is yourself. It's exactly what you're getting people to engage with. You're selling them on the fear of missing out on the emotion. This is not about saving $10 today to, for whatever. It's, do you want to go to this? Are you going to be disappointed afterwards when you didn't go to it? But as you notice, everybody reacts differently to the style of story. I build my brand so that my brand itself is a certain part of the story. Look at the whole name, Fired Up Events, right? You look at that and go, wow, this is going to be something special. Everything I've designed is the idea of putting out that name, Fired Up Events, so that if you see that logo on an event, it's like, oh, this is going to be something. But sometimes it is the storytelling and it depends on the crowd. So if you've got a brand and everybody knows and has been to your events, they know this is going to be top notch. Sometimes you have to do a cliffhanger, like my friend does, where he runs surprise parties. You buy a ticket for $100, he gives you an address, and that's all you get. You get no idea what's going to happen, except he runs good events. Sometimes you have that surprise. Most of the time, I like to be fairly transparent and describe this is the minimum of what you're going to get. You're going to get these three things. And I put that right out front, right on the label. You're going to get dinner, or you're going to get dancing, you're going to get theater. Like I've done dinner events and all sorts of type. And that was all advertised. It was the spontaneous events that people did not expect. Like in the middle of a dinner theater, a 20-foot tall ogre wanders through the event. That happened because the guy who was actually the entertainer on stage wasn't getting off the stage, and the guy in the ogre costume was about to go into heat stroke. So we needed to move it along.
I can see it's starting to guard my chicken wings and my ribs right off the bat for that one.
But it's about the spectacle, but also about the experience. And you always are going to have surprises. Yeah, you're going to have surprises.
One thing that I think you would agree with, Chris, is when you have a currency, let's say like American dollars, it isn't long until somebody's actually counterfeiting. And I find that community is now a word that has gone beyond authentic to inauthentic. And now everyone has a community, whether it's drinking Coke. Tell me about how you separate those two and what's your smell test for a real community?
Well, it always comes down the real community. If you're like this, if you're at arm's length where it's a completely remote community, it's difficult to tell it quickly, but very, very, very often you'll know simply by letting it go for a little while. Attending a number of meetings. If the same people are at every meeting and they're all trying to sell stuff all right in the meeting, it's a pretty good indicator that's an inauthentic community. Most of the communities that I work with, obviously like Canada Growth Network and some of the other ones, we start with the meetings, but the ultimate idea is you have to actually bring in a live element to it. You have to prove it. Without social proof, without legitimate person-to-person proof, you'll never know whether it's real or not. You'll pick up on it. Many, many, many of the online meetings have been very authentic because that they pick up on your authenticity as the leader. That's one of the rules about leadership that people don't understand is how you are as a leader is ultimately going to influence how your events, how your business, how your community is. So I am genuinely authentic and well-meaning in everything that I do, and that influences the community, and that's what people react to. If you can't stand up and be that person, you have to be the person the ideal customer or the ideal community member will be, would be. You have to be that person first.
It's interesting how you mentioning this, and our work with the Canada Growth Network, doing masterminds. Do you have a formula that you think that should be getting used inside that space? I mean, we're going to host a mastermind shortly on Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Shameless plug. And you know, is there something that we should be doing in that space to draw in the audience participation? And I totally agree with you. If the audience is sitting there and if they're not tickled pink past the 20-minute mark, they'll start to fade, right? And you lose them. Is there something that that you found in the past, whether it's a mastermind outside of Canada Growth Network, other spaces? Is there something that you find that makes that more light and lively.
There always is. Is there a special trick arrow that does it every time? No, there is not. There's always an element, but community building, whether it's online or in person, all of it is really, really, really basic. When you're starting a community, whether like in any of these things, you start by welcoming them in. Bring a new member in, welcome them, show them that you appreciate them coming, and then give them something of value, right? So they're starting in, their emotion is coming up right out of the gate. Once you've got that in, then show that you value them by outreach. Show, if they've attended one, make sure you follow up. Say, how was that? Is this good? What can I do? But also give them something of value in multiple ways, multiple value touches in terms of make sure they know what's happening going into it, make sure they have a reason. And so make your promises, tell your story, deliver those promises, right? Step 2. And then step 3 is follow up on those promises and give them hard copy or something to take home with so that they have something that they can actually see as proof that you did deliver your promises. If you do that every time that people meet, they're going to keep coming back. They're going to see the value. They're going to start looking forward to it. Also, when the welcoming in part, especially if you're constantly welcoming and rarely criticizing, people actually start to relax and they recognize it as a safe space. So now they have an emotional investment. They start to build friendships with the people in the community. And now that's the very first time you can start calling it a community, right? When they start to build friendships in between each other.
Hive 604, the Sayoti app.
Yes.
Walk me through that universe. What is Hive 604? Is that a robot or what?
No, that is a company. That is a development company. And this came from a product called Be Looped. And Be Looped stood for Be Looped In. It was a human connection app. It was popular, but it wasn't making any money. And eventually it ran into a roadblock where it needed to be fully redeveloped because one of the developers, and Android as well, had made some poor programming choices in building it. So we needed to rebuild the entire thing. At that point in time, I was an event planner and I wanted that app to allow a community of maybe 5 or 10,000 people to actually interconnect on specific topics that were fully private. I have a friend that worked in the federal government, and I probably knew him 10 years before he actually told me what his real name was, because it was so dangerous he was just a science fiction geek, but being known that he was a science fiction geek in his federal government job would have absolutely stopped any forward advancement that he could have gotten there. And he found that, oh yeah, certain other communities as well were slightly problematic. So he came up with a different name for all of them. And it wasn't until I knew him in all those different communities that I was kind of going, hey, so what gives? And he told me, sometimes you need to keep the communities separate. I do a lot of work with spiritual groups where they're actually church groups and things like that. And I do a lot of group in the science fiction community. And few people realize that the science fiction community and the fetish community have a very broad overlap.
You said fetish. You said fetish, right?
Yeah, I did say fetish. It's not relish. Well, maybe it is relished. The fetish community has a lot of overlap, and the Burning Man community has an awful lot of overlap. And there's the art and creative community has an awful lot of overlap, but you do need to keep those separate. And so that's why I became involved with Be Looped. And then when the decision was made to shut it down and start over, I was invited to come in as the CEO. And that's what I'm doing right now. We're ready to go with that project, and we're just seeking funding to get it started. We already have our developer and all of the eggs in a row. We just need the funding, because now more so than ever before, that is actually critically necessary. They've started actually recognizing that the way that social media apps are run and actually achieve their goal of getting people in and getting people consistently following, that is actually a detriment to your mental health. They've actually proven conclusively that it damages your brain. We need to allow that mental health step to occur outside of that and allow people to more easily communicate with each other, because it always comes down to people connecting with people. And that's what that project is. Sayoti is a people connection app where you can just invite the people that you feel trust. There's an app that will actually notify people on your list, like through Sayoti, that you're having a very, very, very bad day. You might be in deep depression. Maybe you're even suicidal. It will silently send out a message to your friends that you've identified as your most trusted friends they will know they will now know you're having a bad day, and they will reach out. They will call you, they will phone you, they will show up. And that is absolutely the most powerful thing in the world. I was having a bad day and my friends showed up with a number of 5-gallon pails and a lot of rum. And yes, when I could no longer walk, they all high-fived each other and said, "Our job is done." And they left. And I was hungover for 2 days.
Yeah, I was going to say that the hangover was followed afterwards.
It's funny, you were talking about overlapping communities. It reminds me of what we've heard in the States where someone sent out the wrong message on Signal. I could see fistfights happening, Chris.
No, because those people that would start fistfights would not be in any community that I would run, right? Because it's about curation as well. This is a thing that if you're going to build a strong, intimate community, you need to be able to read the people. You curate the people directly. There's a lot of people involved in coaching and the event industry and the networking industry. You don't see them all that much, especially in my networks, because I curate them out. I recognize that they are difficult and they are going to not be a positive for the group. I just by again, it's a lot of subtle signals, but they don't get invited. They don't get welcomed into the group. And they very rapidly realize, this doesn't feel super comfortable. And I got a handshake and everybody else is getting hugs and nobody's actually coming to talk to me. And maybe this isn't my group.
So, from a tech perspective, is there an underrated tech tool for small medium businesses to help elevate gatherings? The groups. Is there a tool that's readily available for folks out there, but it's just not being capitalized on?
I would say there's an overrated tool. AI is not as helpful as you think. If you are already intelligent and you know people, if you've got the people part down, then AI can be very helpful. There are AI apps that help you plan events, and there's a lot of things that help you plan timelines and do your social media and do all those less personal pieces. But if you actually ask AI how to build a community, part of the thing I was curious about this, and because I'm writing books on using pieces of AI and things like that, I asked it, how would you write a book on building a community? And it happily popped out this 12-chapter book on how to build community. And I read through it and I went, no, 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 no. And I recognized that it missed the nuances of everything that I did. And it's like, I thought about it. So why can't, I mean, BPT and all these, they represent the sum total of human knowledge, right? Yeah, they go in and they access everything that people know. And these are the answers that came up with. And I said, oh, wait a minute. And the light bulb went on. People don't know how to do communities. People don't know how to people. Most people don't have any idea how to build a long-lasting, self-supporting, stable community. They all think they do, and they try to do it, and it disappears. And it happens for really good reasons. The West Coast Science Fiction Association, it kind of started to pretty seriously explode before COVID, but it was 50 years old. It was founded on principles and ideas that were 50 years old, and society had changed. But even in the short term, people don't understand how to build groups. A church group, that's a little bit different, but still, you can't build groups that everybody shows up week after week after week. It's hard to do, and that's the magic that GPT has no chance to actually capture. I would suggest that your very best resource is the exact same thing I've been talking about for the entire podcast, is your people. Engage your people. That is absolutely the magic bullet to build a community, is start by building your community and start by engaging your people and letting them help.
So we're on this box called Zoom, and there's an internet behind it and the ability for money to change hands. I'm guessing that going from transactional to transformational needs to happen desperately if we're going to save our society. So why don't you tell me about how you would want to get transformational?
So the only way you can actually do transformational is starting from within and usually having somebody to guide you. Right. And it has to be done as much as I have attended many, 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 many motivational seminars, and shout out to Harv Eker for knocking them out of the park because they're amazing. And I learned most of what I learned from him. However, if you've ever been to a motivational seminar, how long does it last?
4 days.
Well, the effect lasts, Sometimes the effect lasts for 2 days past the weekend and is gone. Sometimes it lasts for a few months. Rare occasions it lasts as long as I do. For me, it lasted for decades. But that's because I was already ready to listen and primed for those lessons. So en masse, it's very, very, very difficult to create an instant solution that makes that change. So we have to do it incrementally by growing exactly what I'm talking about, growing more and more and more of these communities and recognizing, like, a shameless plug. It's not even my book. This is called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. This is critical right now. And most of this book is talking about how to overcome authoritarianism and various other our strong government forces and things like that. But ultimately, it's actually talking about building community. For the last 75 years, there's been a concentrated effort to actually make people more individual and to pull away from the family and pull away from their networks and be a success on their own. That's the part that we need to undo in terms of the messaging. And I'm very, very, very pleased to say the newest generation, I don't know what you call the youngest cohort right now, generational cohort, they understand that. Most of the time you'll see them going, yeah, no, this whole 40-hour work week, this whole making it on my own, this is ridiculous. It's too hard. I'm going to go live in a house with 4, 5, 6 of my friends, and we're all going to work part-time, and we're going to all have more money than we could possibly choke on, because you don't need, even in Vancouver, you don't need to be earning $100,000 a year yourself. Right? If you've got 6 people earning $20,000 a year, you've got all your bills covered and more to spare because you're not paying any taxes on it. So there are ways, but it has to come from the community. And all we can do is preach, this is my soapbox, and talk about it and continually spread the story and lead by example. The current article that I'm working on right now to go out in the newspaper is, where does leadership start? And it starts with you. It starts now. Just start. Do something small that makes a difference to somebody, and then do it again tomorrow, and do it again tomorrow, or the day after that. Small things like that. Listening is probably the single most powerful piece of leadership, and it's also the single most powerful piece in community growth. Listening.
It's interesting. This is the third time today I've heard the word "just start." One on a meme and then on a previous podcast. Just start, just get her going and ramp up. So, Chris, if someone wanted to reach out to you and say, "Listen, I want to start on this journey. I want to get some help. I want to be involved in things. I want to create things." And before you even answer that question, how to get a hold of you, tell us a little bit about Riddick and your relationship to Riddick, the movie.
Riddick, yes. So Riddick was fantastic for reasons that you would not expect. I came into Riddick, so my primary department is special effects, but because I'm a true jack of all trades, I was also in the construction department of IATSE 891. I got hired to do construction on that because that is very common. You'll build a big movie like that for a year before you start shooting. So I came in late, and I spent 4 months on the floor of Riddick building, and I became part of one of the lead build crews because we had a crew of 4 of us and we could build anything. So they came to us for when David Toohey had a dream, I shit you not, he came in and he says, "I had a dream." And the entire crew, everybody heard that, kind of went, "Oh no, oh no." He dreamt that entire cliff scene where the sun is coming up and they're trying to climb that cliff and get over that before they're blasted into dust. We were told on the Monday that Toohey had that dream. Monday morning, we're told. And they said, "By the way, we're shooting it Thursday. You need to build that cliff and have it ready to go for Thursday morning." And it's like, okay. So obviously we did it, because not only do people in the film industry and the event industry and we just do that, right? You're faced with a problem, you solve it. You don't complain, you just get it done. So we built it, and it was shortly after that I got pulled into the special effects crew. They knew me already. They knew I was working there, and they said, "It's time for you to flip over. You're going to come," because we just finished building the lava field, the big, all that lava, which coincidentally was also the ice field, and it was all of those things. We just redressed it. But it was time to actually plumb that and make all the steam vents work and all the lava and all the snow and the dust. And they said, "You know this, you're doing it. Start plumbing all of this stuff with steam." And So I plumbed it all. And then when we shot on that, I spent the next month underneath that set, day in and day out, running 400-degree steam lines. Because when you hyper-pressurize steam, it gets hot. So I ran all of that stuff. And so I put in another 4 months ultimately on that movie, shooting it out until the very end. And it was absolute riot. And it was very funny watching Vin Diesel. So Vin Diesel would watch us work in the construction department. He loved watching people work and he loved watching things come together. And when he first saw me working on the special effects, he kind of did a double take. It's like, wait a minute, what are you doing over here?
Stuff.
But, it's just like, that's how we do it. Ultimately, you adapt and you build, and I've still got friends that were involved in that. And I wish I knew that show intimately. I had an opportunity to potentially get a Necromonger costume. And then the person who was actually ultimately ended up in charge of all the costumes basically had to ask for it back because they were all serial numbered. And she knew which ones were missing. And she knew me well enough to know that I had one and it had to go away because they were accounting for every costume on that show. They accounted for every piece of that show and they took it away. The only thing that I have left is a set of blueprints I was working off of that actually demonstrate the cavern where the landing craft goes when they land on the prison planet, and it screams into the landing bay area. The doors
Superheated.
close. I
Yeah.
have the blueprints for that because we had to build it. We had to build the craft and the actual hangar. Once in construction, once in special effects.
Wow.
It was amusing. The budget they had to build the craft, the fellow who built it, the effects technician said, $10,000 more and I could have made that thing actually fly.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Well, I don't think you're offering flying lessons, but how do we get a hold of you if we want to spin up a good event?
Couple of ways. So I'm doing a lot of consulting. So just as of earlier this week, I set up Chris at Sturges.ca, CHRIS at STURGES.ca. Reach out to me there. I'll set it up as soon as I'm done this call, I promise. But also Chris at firedupevents.ca. That's always a good way to get me. That is all about events and event planning and event operations. And I'll tell you something that I just found out last night because of my role with the World Referral Network and my role with the provincial government here in BC and my role with ILEA. I am going to be involved in planning and building a very sporting event that is coming up in a very short period of time. And we're going to need all hands on deck for that. We have 8 months to do 5 years of work. Because I also did the Olympics. I did the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympics, not the part that failed. And I've got a lot of experience in large events and I know how much time it takes. So that's a rule of thumb for everybody here, everybody who's listening. If you've got an event, leave enough time. If you're doing a birthday party for your best buddy who already knows about it, you still need a month. If you're doing anything larger than that, you need 3 months. If you're running anything that's going to have hundreds of people, anything that you need to broadcast, promote, etc., any gala, you need at least a year. So allow enough time. And if you're in doubt about how much time you need, reach out. That advice I'll give for free.
I want to say thank you to Chris Sturges, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. Chris often says that he approaches events the way he once approached special effects on film sets. We just talked about with Riddick, solving problems creatively so people can experience something unforgettable. If this sounds helpful to you, connect with Chris and take the next step in your journey.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.